Hello to all my peeps out there in the chat room and all my lurkers and all the folks that'll view it on Memorex later. Glad to have you with me today on the 31st day of August 2016. Hello to all my peeps and we got this thing a blasting. We'll get that shut down. There we go. Now we're cooking. Man, had some technical difficulties at the last minute here. Glad we got all that ironed out. YouTube works fine and sometimes it don't. Oh my goodness. It's a nice day here in Indiana. It's overcast, but it's nice. The temperature's about mid-70s, and there's not much of a breeze blowing, but the humidity's down. So it's a pretty nice day. I hope it's nice where you are. Get out there and enjoy that some this afternoon. We're about to kiss August goodbye. So you know, years clipping on by, whether we like it or not. Got a lot of news for you today, so we're going to go ahead and hop right into it. First one we got here is off of theguardian.com, and it's about Turkey. It says Turkey threatens more strikes on Syrian Kurdish militia. It said it will carry out more strikes on a Syrian Kurdish militia if it fails to retreat beyond the Euphrates River. Turkish forces press on with a two-pronged operation inside Syria against Islamic State jihads and Kurdish people protection units, shelling more than a dozen targets. Well, it's a Syrian Kurdish People's Protection Unit. They call it the YPG, are hugely sensitive as the Kurdish group, seen by Ankara as a terror group, is allied with the U.S. and fights against Syria. Ankara is said to have killed 25 Kurdish terrorists in strikes on YPG positions on Sunday, a day after Turkish soldier died in a rocket attack allegedly by the militia. Washington said the clashes were unacceptable and urged an immediate de-escalation. Turkey's operation aims to push the YPG back across the Euphrates to prevent it from joining up region east of the river that is already under its control, with the Kurdish-held area to the west. Last week, the U.S. Vice President Joe Biden said Washington had to go back across the Euphrates or risk losing American support. But Ankara says it had seen no evidence of the militia doing so. Turkey's foreign minister, Mevlut Cavusoglu, gosh, these names are something else, said the YPG needs to cross east of the Euphrates as soon as possible. So long as they don't, they will be a target. In places where it has moved, the YPG forces everyone out, including Kurds who don't think like it does, and carries out ethnic cleansing. The ethnic composition of the area around the city of Manbij city, west of the Euphrates, captured the YPG from ISIS this month, was largely Arab. He said those who had lived in the area before fighting broke out should return rather than lose out on new Kurdish migrants. The the UK, I learned to read, I went to public school. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said that at least 40 civilians were killed in Turkish shelling and airstrikes on Sunday. Ankara strongly rejects the claims. Allegations that civilians were shot or targeted do not reflect the truth, the Turkish Prime Minister's office said, adding that the army was taking all necessary measures to prevent any harm to the civilian population. It said 13 villages had been cleared of terrorist elements and were now controlled by anti-regime Syrian fighters that Ankara refers to as Free Syrian Army, or the FSA. Last week, Ankara-backed forces captured ISIS border strongholds of Jarablus, facing seeming little resistance from jihadists who fled to bases further south. A Pentagon spokesman said that Washington was monitoring reports of airstrikes and clashes and found such fighting in an area clear of ISIS unacceptable and source of deep concern. He said the United States was not involved in these activities. They were not coordinated with U.S. forces, and we do not support them. The spokesman called for steps to de-escalate the situation and said Washington had once again told the YPG to retreat east of the Euphrates. This had largely occurred, he said. The NTV television that said that Turkish artillery had shelled 15 targets in northern Syria on Monday. It did not say which group was targeted. The Deputy Prime Minister, Numan Kurtulmuş, said one of the key aims of the operation was to prevent the creation of a corridor controlled by the YPG stretching from Iraq to the verge of the Mediterranean. If that happens, it means Syria has been divided. NTV television quoted him as saying, he said all relevant parties had been informed of Turkey's operation in Syria, including the regime of the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, who is a bitter enemy of Ankara. But Kurtulmuş denied Turkey was at war. We are not pursuing an aim of becoming permanent power in Syria. Turkey is not an invader. Turkey is not entering a war, he said. So there's the update on what's happening over in Turkey. The next one that we have here is off of the express.co.uk. And this one says Britain deploys £1 billion to Persian Gulf to obliterate the Islamic State. And it says the vessel, the HMS Daring, will be deployed to the Persian Gulf to back up operations in war-torn Syria and Iraq. Trying to play here that we've got to try to get stopped. See if we can get that to go away. There we go. The state-of-the-art ship will provide information to RAF jets flying air operations against ISIS and protect U.S. aircraft carriers from attack. It will patrol one of the world's busiest commercial shipping lanes. Defense Secretary Michael Fallon said the armed forces are making a real difference in the world. He said all three armed services are making a vital contribution to defeating ISIS. RAF aircraft are hitting the terrorists daily on the ground. The Army is providing counter-explosive training to Iraq troops. The Royal Navy helps protect coalition carriers in the Gulf as they launch strikes. With the biggest defense budget in Europe and the second biggest in the nation, second biggest in NATO, our armed forces are making a real difference around the world. But it comes after it was revealed taxpayers were to foot the bill because the pricey ships cannot handle the Gulf's warm water. Innovative gas turbine engines driving the 6 Type 45 destroyers are known to fail and degrade catastrophically in very warm seas. The representative of engine manufacturers Rolls-Royce told the House of Commons Defense Committee last month that the conditions in the Gulf were far more arduous than the specifications detailed by the Ministry of Defense in its contract. The Defense Minister, Harriet Baldwin, told the committee there comes a point where, in plain English, the warranty runs out. There were fears of clashes in the Gulf last week after 4 small Iranian boats harassed an American destroyer, leading to the vessel firing warning shots. You have the information on that big destroyer. All these URLs are in the description of the video so that you can look at them yourself if you want. Some of them have videos in them. Take a look at those at your leisure. For everything here, and in addition to that, a lot of these sites have ads and stuff that I can't put out on YouTube because of copyright restrictions. So there you have my reasoning behind all this. Well, we got something trying to play on this. Let's try to get that shut down. If we can get the page to stop jumping around on me. It doesn't want to stop jumping. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, this one is off the mirror.co.uk. It says Russians fear nuclear doomsday as giant mushroom cloud appears over skies in Serbia. Interesting article because it is, if you pull it up and take a look at it, it is a big mushroom cloud. However, it has nothing to do with any bombs, but I can see how people would be alarmed. The article reads, an enormous mushroom-shaped cloud rises ominously above the Siberian town, sparking fears among witnesses that doomsday has arrived. The terrifying sight could be seen for miles around and was captured on video from the city of Kemerovo in Russia's Kemerovo Oblast region. Emergency services were inundated with calls from worried onlookers that nuclear bomb had been dropped and that annihilation was imminent. Others feared there had been an explosion at the coal mines in nearby Kuzbass region. In fact, terrifying on-looking spectacle was in reality a rather beautiful, naturally occurring thunderstorm cloud. The anvil-shaped nimbus often appeared after heavy thunderstorm, meteorologists told the agency Sputnik. Locals, including Sergei, recorded images and footage of the extraordinary cloud formation. And they got several shots of it there. It says bomb scare after illegal chemicals found at home of pyro enthusiasts. While many were relieved by the news that life would continue, others took it as a sign from the gods that it was the perfect time to pick mushrooms, a favorite Russian activity at this time of year. One social media user wrote, "A mushroom cloud has grown today, so this is probably a hint that the mushroom season is in full swing. It's time to pick mushrooms. So beautiful." And so I guess that's one way of Mother Nature telling you something. But yeah, there is that link there if you want to click on that. In the article, it talks about a bomb scare after illegal chemicals found at home of a pyro enthusiast. That would be an interesting read there for you. The next one that we have here is off the Express.com. And it's Putin snub to UN. Kremlin announces Russian leader will not attend the General Assembly. Announced today that Putin does not plan to participate in the 71st session at the UN General Assembly. Instead, Russian President is expected to send Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Jumping with ads trying to play here on it, and we want to get that to quit. Good golly. All right. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the president does not plan to participate in General Assembly this year. Preliminary programs of the event say that Mr. Lavrov will address the General Assembly on September the 23rd. Diplomats from across the world are due to meet at the UN headquarters in New York from September 20th to the 26th. It's unclear why Putin has decided not to. Okay. He addressed the assembly last year as protests raged outside against Russia's role in the Ukraine. The Russian president nearly found himself at the center of a diplomatic incident when he snubbed President Barack Obama. Putin turned up 20 minutes late for the lunch with the U.S. leader. And there's a bunch of pictures there in that article if you want to take a look at it. It says, but the diplomats defended Putin's lateness, saying anybody that's been around in the UN during the General Assembly knows that it's total chaos inside that building, so people are running quite late frequently. Debates will start with speech by the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and President of the 71st session, Peter Thompson. French Presidents Barack Obama and Francois Hollande will also speak on the first day, as well as UK Prime Minister Theresa May. Brazil's acting president Michael Temer is also expected to make a speech. So there you have that. Putin doesn't think much of Obama in the first place, so I can't blame him for not put up with him further. The next one we have here is off of yahoo.com. It says, Iran deploys long-range missiles to Fordo nuclear site. Article comes out of Tehran, and it says Tehran has deployed a recently delivered Russian-made long-range missile system to central Iran to protect its Fordo nuclear facility, State Division said Sunday. Protecting nuclear facilities is paramount in General Farzad Esmaili, the commander of Iran's air defense, told the IRIB channel. Today's Iran sky, one of the region, he added. A video showed an S-300 carrier truck in Fordo raising its missile launchers toward the sky next to other counter-strike weaponry. The images were aired hours later. Anatola Ali Khamenei gave a speech to Air Force commanders, including Esmaili, in which he stresses that Iranian military power was for defensive purposes only. Continued opposition and hype on the S-300 or the Fordo site are examples of the viciousness of the enemy. The S-300 system is a defense system, not an assault one, but the Americans did their best not to get a hold of it. The Fordo site, built into a mountain near the city of Qom, has stopped enriching uranium since the January implementation of a nuclear deal with world powers. Under the historic accord, Iran dismantled most of its estimated 19,000 centrifuges, giant spinning machines that enrich uranium, keeping only 5,000 active for research purposes. Iran and the United States, Britain, China, France, Germany, and Russia negotiated for more than 2 years before signing a historic July 2015 agreement that removed some international sanctions in return for curbs on Tehran's controversial atomic program. The information on Iran. This one is off of SputnikNews.com. And we get it to scroll down a little bit. Here it goes. As tension in the South China Sea region continues to rise, both the U.S. and China appear ready and willing to engage in a contest of electronic warfare capabilities. During the last few years, China has apparently constructed a considerable number of radar installations on the South China Sea islands. These facilities, which could potentially be employed for a variety of purposes, drastically increase China's real-time awareness and intelligence capabilities over a large portion of the region. Furthermore, while radar installations may appear less threatening than, for example, surface-to-air missile systems or air bases, they in fact give China a significant edge over other powers that operate in the South China Seas, according to an article posted on the Australian Strategy Policy Institute's blog website, The Strategist. This rapidly expanding radar network, further augmented by Beijing's growing military and intelligence satellite network, as it appears that many of the aforementioned radar facilities are also being outfitted with satellite uplinks, will allow China to better track foreign military assets in the region. What this allows is more sophisticated and reliable over-the-horizon targeting capability for China's growing arsenal of anti-ship ballistic missiles, extending a more credible threat envelope of A2/AD, anti-access area denial coverage to moving targets like aircraft carrier strike groups, the article's author points out. Facilities may also allow China to jam and disrupt enemy radar and electronic sensors. The U.S., however, appears eager to pick up the gauntlet and bolster its electronic warfare capabilities in the region as well. For example, in June, Washington deployed 4 U.S. Navy EA-18G Growler electronic attack aircraft to the Philippines for bilateral training missions, the type of aircraft that are in fact capable of jamming radars like the ones employed by Beijing in the South China Sea. At this rate, it becomes increasingly possible that the U.S. and China would engage in a contest for electronic warfare supremacy in the region, deploying additional EW assets in an attempt to gain the advantage in this area dimension of the ongoing standoff. The electronic spectrum, largely out of sight of the public eye, is becoming an area of growing dynamic between China and the United States in the South China Sea. This contest, if it grows and persists, will only add to the underlying tensions and risk of escalation in the South China Sea, the author surmises. So there you have the information on what's going on there. The next one I have here is this one is off of girlsjustwannahaveguns.com. It says that the name of this article is Security to Take Over Elections, which I guess we should not be, but we need to be aware of what these knuckleheads are doing. After threats of the elections getting hacked, it has been announced Homeland Security will be taking over the election process. The FBI made the announcement early today, which would have been yesterday. Even before the FBI identified new cyber attacks on 2 separate state election boards, the Department of Homeland Security began considering declaring the election a infrastructure, giving the same control over security it has over Wall Street and the electric power grid. The latest admission of attacks could speed up that effort, possibly including the upcoming presidential election, according to officials. We should carefully consider whether our election system, our election process is like the financial sector, like the power grid. Homeland Security Jay Johnson said. Vital national interest in our election process, so I do think we need to consider whether it should be considered by my department and others critical infrastructure, he said at media conference earlier this month hosted by the Science Monitor. DHS has a vital security role in 16 areas of structure, and they provide a model for what the department and Johnson could have in mind for the election. And wow, that just even leaves me. I've wondered how they plan to rig the election, and there it is. There it is. Next one we have is off of BizPac Review, and it says election fraud begins in Florida. NBC affiliate posts election results for local race that hasn't happened yet. I can't make this stuff up. And a Republican candidate for Florida House District 86 got a rude awakening Saturday morning when the Democratic candidate running in the same race informed her that West Palm Beach NBC affiliate WPTV posted the results of the primary election 3 days before the actual primary. The station's website reported that Bennett garnered 12,189 votes in her primary bid against Stuart Mears, giving her just 45% of the vote, according to Google search of her name with election results. Louisville, Kentucky Fox affiliate WDRB reported. No need to go to the polls Tuesday, folks. WPTV has the results all figured out. Bennett reported the gap on her Facebook page. Election fraud is already taking place here in Palm Beach County, the candidate said. WPTV is posting election results today when the race is Tuesday. And contact everyone you know to vote Bennett on Tuesday. I have a snapshot of it. Palm Beach, it begins with you, the voter. And then it goes on, it says the search came up with the results, WPTV election results, West Palm Beach News, South Florida breaking news. R. Laurel Bennett, 45% with 12,189 votes. The Democrat who informed Bennett of the election results told Bennett that the station did the same thing with her primary results. It announced that she'd lost to her Democratic rival, Matt Wilhite. The station's website acknowledged that it posted bogus election results and added a disclaimer. And it says, attention, the information below is for test purposes only. Oh my goodness. And it's goes on, it says, in order to make sure we bring you fast and accurate election results on election day, we are testing our election page ahead of time with test data, the disclaimer said. On election day, this message will be removed and the actual election results will be displayed on this page. A bit like closing the door after the horse got out, don't you think? Okay, Bennett told BizPac Review that when she made the discovery, she had to phone WPTV 4 times before they would delete the election results. She'd even asked the station to use bonus candidate names, well, it says bonus, I think she meant bogus there, bogus candidate names, if they were going to give bogus results, the station declined. Eric Weiss, WPTV director of new media, informed BizPac Review that the bogus election data on candidates running in the state and national elections that are used for test purposes are provided by and under the control of the Associated Press. The station can't change the data or the names, Weiss said. He advised that these tests are conducted per day, generally 3 days a week, in the weeks leading up to each election, and was simply bad luck that Bennett happened to enter her Google search at one of the times the test was being conducted. Holy moly. All right, the next one we have is off of the DC clothesline. And it says here, Louisiana officials demand that self-reliant locals stop surviving the flood without permission. Step up. Around the world, governments have recently been issuing an unsettling call for the citizens to become more self-reliant. Just this week, the governments of both Germany and Czechoslovakia warned that people should be prepared for the worst case possible scenario. But here in the United States, just the opposite is happening. Our government seems to have unquenchable thirst for cracking down on those who take responsibility for themselves. There is an abundance of evidence of this in Louisiana. The southern state has been hit with the worst flooding in over 500 years. While the final numbers won't be known for some time, Governor John Bell Edwards' office has estimated 646 houses were damaged and 30,000 people rescued. Other people escaped on their own. FEMA says 109,398 people or households have applied for housing help and 25,000 National Flood Insurance Program claims have been filed. The American Red Cross called it the worst natural disaster since Hurricane Sandy struck New Jersey in 2012. This massive disaster was all but ignored by the mainstream media since it didn't fit the current agenda of divisiveness and racial tension. So what did the folks in Louisiana do? They rolled up their sleeves and took care of business. First, the Cajun Navy, a loosely organized group of local fishers, boaters, hunters, and guides, took it upon themselves to begin rescuing people trapped by the sudden flood. Initially, the local sheriff's department was reluctant to accept the assistance. They became quickly overwhelmed. They realized that they were disregarding a valuable asset. Initially, authorities in Livingston Parish didn't want private citizens headed into the water, worried amateur rescuers might end up in trouble themselves, said Leighton Ricks, the parish president. But as the calls from stranded residents continued to mount, at one point, Livingston officials said they were about 150 calls behind. Parish officials relented. Then it was like, do you have this? Do you have insurance? Are you truly capable of doing this? Rick said. And as it turned out, we couldn't have done it without those guys. They were a tremendous asset for our people. Locals who were not affected by the flood began cooking and donating food. Others helped flood victims to begin gutting their homes so they could start to rebuild. This community in the bayou pulled together to show the world that a real emergency response begins at home, undertaken by the very people who were affected. They didn't wait around bemoaning the lack of FEMA, Red Cross, and government aid. They got to work. Own shelters in local businesses that were not affected. They distributed immediate relief to those who were displaced. They performed their own rescues, organized the response, and used social media to coordinate their efforts. They made just about everyone in America who heard about their efforts feel a wave of pride. In fact, they were so effective at their own free market local disaster relief that they rendered the government assistance all but unnecessary. And that is when the government said, oh no, we can't have that. Of course, the government doesn't want citizens to realize that they are perfectly capable of rescuing themselves. If people realize that they can perform independently and that it is much better than performing with the strictures of government regulations, they will be a heck of a lot harder to control. And uttered the scariest words ever. We're from the government and we're here to help. Like a horde of modern-day carpetbaggers, they began helping by forcing people who were struggling to rebuild to purchase permits. That's right, they forced people to ask for permission for the right to repair their own property. The daunting expense of rebuilding in itself, those state permission slips may make reconstruction costs prohibitive for some, while others, given the strict regulation pertaining to the floodplain and more, may not be allowed to rebuild on their own property at all. We haven't suspended let me try that again. We haven't suspended any of our requirements for permitting. Dustin DuPie, building official for Baton Rouge and East Baton Rouge, told Reason in an interview. Before they start making any repairs, they just need to call in and check with us to see what they need. Really? These people who are about to undertake a repair have no idea what they need unless they ask the government? Fortunately, in a small act of grace pointed out by Reason, fees for reconstruction permits have been waived by local officials, though the permits themselves are still mandatory, as permission to repair some of the 20,000 flood-ravaged buildings in East Baton Rouge might not be given at all. How very kind. But that isn't the worst of it. They also decided to charge fees to the Cajun Navy before they were allowed to continue rescuing people. I couldn't make this up. The Libertarian Republic reported, no good deed goes unpunished. The Cajun Navy is a group of volunteers that operates at its own expense to rescue people trapped in flooded areas in Louisiana. They use their own boats, they risk their lives, and now that people have noticed that they are far more efficient than government rescue efforts, there are plans to require them to pay a fee before they are allowed to do any good. Don't worry, it's just a small fee, legislators explain, maybe only $50. That would be worth it to put authority behind the Cajun Navy, wouldn't it? When the Cajun Navy members said no thanks to the government who wanted to train them to do what the government wasn't even able or willing to do, they were treated like criminals. That's right, the government deployed the police to prevent these good Samaritans that we all wish now were our own neighbors from continuing with their efforts. Louisiana State Senator Jonathan Perry is the engineer of the licensing requirement. Perry said that if members of the Cajun Navy continue without his legislation, they will be stopped by law enforcement officials from rescuing residents past police barricades. Under current state law, citizens who cross police perimeters are breaking the law and could face punishment. You can be assured he's doing this for the Cajun Navy guys' own good. He is trying to empower them. That must also be what the Red Cross is doing when they make it more difficult for good-hearted locals to help. Beth Yancey Houghton, a local woman who volunteered, made the following post on Facebook. And here's her quote. It says, so as we are headed back home from River Center in Baton Rouge volunteering our nursing services, Dawn and I have come to the conclusion that neither of us will ever volunteer or donate to the Red Cross. The Red Cross basically takes over the shelters and starts refusing clothes, donations, and various volunteer services unless they are previously contracted. So what does that mean? Well, 60 boxes of donuts were discarded this morning because the delivery vendor was not in contract. Hot meals were refused because the entity providing wasn't contracted. Medical supplies, including medications, were trashed for some reason. For the same reason. Clothes that were donated needed to be left on the street unless they were furnished by Red Cross. As of tomorrow, shelters we were at will be completely overtaken by the Red Cross. Other than that, medical area, because they couldn't have the actual room since LSU has a contract with state to provide medical care. It's sad when the military police were helping to protect medical areas from the Red Cross when there are so many other issues at hand. Anyway, next time, some words have been left out of this, I guess. It says, anyway, next time to want to donate or volunteer your services, do your homework. The Red Cross vehemently denies Houghton's claim, except this. Nancy Malone, spokeswoman for the American Red Cross, said there's misinformation being spread around. People are confusing the Red Cross with their partner organizations. She also said that there were liabilities to feeding people food that doesn't come from certified vendors, which is why some offers to cook hot meals have been turned away. But she categorically rejected allegations that the Red Cross has thrown away donations. If you came today and said you have 5,000 meals to offer, well, we already had food delivered today. Let's find a way to arrange for you to help someone else or come back another day, Malone said. It has to be about coordination. We are held accountable to state regulations. This food has to come. Perhaps technically they didn't throw food away, but turned it away, even though they didn't have enough meals from certified kitchens to feed everyone. They make it seem like a conspiracy theory that many preparedness enthusiasts plan to avoid government intervention in the aftermath of a disaster. But as you can see in Louisiana, the intervention often takes the form of exerting control in an effort to foster cultural dependency. The rules, regulations, licenses, and permissions mean that anyone receiving help must be compliant. An article called "Your Right to Fear Government Intervention During Emergencies" sums it up neatly. And that is a link. If you want to pull that up and click on it, you can read it. In a crisis, whether a natural disaster that displaces you from your home, war, or I guess that's how it's pronounced, this is exactly how you will be treated by government so-called assistance. Red tape, bureaucrats, non-essential rules that deny help because of more non-essential rules. Nothing will come easy. The process will favor a few. Your needs will be met only on occasion and by pure coincidence. So while the governments of Europe are actually requesting that their citizens begin preparing for the future, the very idea of self-sufficiency scares the heck out of the United States government. It's important to note that their need to make us dependent isn't only restricted to the aftermath of a disaster. They seem to do everything they can to hobble those of us who even attempt to become even a little bit more self-reliant. And it says here is an example of the anti-independent stance of our government. And these are links that you can click on. The first one says, most burning stoves become illegal. The second one is, in some states, collecting rainwater is illegal. Third one, living off the grid is illegal in some states. Next one, in some areas you can't even camp on your own land. Unfortunately, I could go on and on. Here in the U.S., we are strongly encouraged to rely on the system. In the event of national emergency, our government seems to prefer people to line up and get a government-issued MRE than to pull something out of the pantry, share with our neighbors, and calmly go about our business. If we become too self-reliant, then it becomes obvious we don't need them or their ridiculous regulations. This is the greatest fear of those in power, our knowledge of their irrelevance. And maybe that's the reason for the complete lack of coverage in the flooding in Louisiana. Not only was the flood a non-story because it doesn't fit the current narrative of black versus white, it doesn't fit the narrative that we are helpless and in need of the government to save us. But this isn't at all true. We actually incredibly capable of preparing ourselves for life's disasters and then dealing with them when they occur. If you aren't prepared yet, you can go here to put yourself on the path to self-reliance, and that is a link for you to click. The Cajun people didn't wait for rescue. They rescued themselves. They proved that they had the wherewithal to take care of business at hand without daddy government swooping in to save the day. In fact, the only thing the government did for Louisiana was to make their lives more difficult by forcing Belgrade residents to get permission to go about the business of rescuing and rebuilding. So there you have that article, and I strongly urge you to pull that up and click on the links and learn for yourself how to, if there's a disaster that takes place, don't be standing there waiting for the government to come and rescue you, because that probably won't happen unless you have money to pay them for whatever permits or whatever it is they think you need. Good golly. The next one is Fox News Politics. It says, Trump to visit Mexico and meet with Pena Nieto ahead of immigration speech. Has doggone thing trying to play on it. Cut off. See if we can figure out how to do that. Gotta wait for it to come all the way up here, I think. Okay, there we go. It says Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump plans to detour from the campaign trail on Wednesday to visit Mexico and meet with President Enrique Pena Nieto at vacation. A surprise trip scheduled just hours before Trump delivers an immigration policy speech in Arizona. Nieto and Trump each confirmed late Tuesday that Trump accepted the invitation and the two would meet in private on Wednesday. Campaign manager Kellyanne Conway told Fox News the two would discuss illegal immigration, trade, and drugs. Mike Pence also said that they would begin a conversation about proposed border wall along with other issues. He's going to begin with a dialogue with issues that we differ on, but also issues of common interest, Pence told Fox News. News of the surprise visit was getting mixed reactions inside Mexico. Former President Vicente Fox told CNN that Trump is not welcomed by the Mexican people, calling it ask about the comments. Pence said he's glad the current president has a different attitude. I think today it's more about a relationship, Pence said. The visit will come as Trump looks stance on immigration, which is the centerpiece of the presidential campaign. Trump has called for deportation of illegal immigrants living in the U.S. and building a wall along the Mexican border while having Mexico pay for it. Recently, Trump has signaled he would soften his stance a bit after meetings with Hispanic leaders. Conway said on Fox News Sunday that Trump wants to find the fair and human to address the issue, which includes whether to separate families to enforce federal law. Last week, President Nieto, who has been critical of Trump's insistence that Mexico would pay for the wall, invited both the Republican nominee and the Democrat Hillary Clinton to visit his country. Trump confirmed on Twitter late Tuesday that he had accepted Nito's invitation. Clinton's campaign said in a statement that Trump's trip to Mexico ultimately doesn't matter in the long run. Of this campaign, Donald Trump has painted Mexicans as rapists and criminals and has promised to deport 16 million people, including children and U.S. citizens. He has said we should force Mexico to pay for his giant border wall. He has said we should ban remittance to families in Mexico if Mexico doesn't pay up. What matters is what Donald Trump says to voters in Arizona, not Mexico, and whether he remains committed to the splitting up of families and deportation of millions. A senior campaign official told Fox News that Clinton will meet with Nito at time. The Washington Post first reported the potential of a trip. Trump is scheduled to speak on immigration Wednesday evening in Phoenix. He was already out he was already out west on Tuesday for a campaign stop near Seattle, giving him enough time to jet down to Mexico for a brief visit before the evening speech. By presidential candidates, even to neighboring countries, which Mexico are an enormous logistical and security undertaking. Chris Christie, a close Trump advisor, has been among those pushing Trump to make the trip, according to a person familiar with their conversations. Christie made his own successful trip to Mexico City in September 2014 and has a warm relationship with the Mexican president. So that's what Trump's up to. We have here is a little bit alarming. It's off of the dailysheeple.com. Debtor's prison. Judge gives cancer patient 90 days in jail for being too sick to pay his bills. And you thought debtor's prison didn't exist. While rapists that admitted to their crimes are getting no jail time and no convictions, likely because they or their parents were wealthy, those that aren't as financially well endowed are being thrown into jail for the saddest reasons. Judge Milas Butch Hale from Sherwood, Arkansas, has been accused of running a modern-day debtor's prison after he recently sentenced a 44-year-old man with pancreatic cancer to 90 days in jail. President and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law, Kristen Clark, said of sentencing people like this to jail, here's your quote, "People are doomed for failure when they appear before the court, and most significantly trapped in this never-ending cycle of expanding debt. With the resurgence of debtor's prison, we will continue to see people cycle in and out of our jails and prisons across the country merely because of their inability to pay fines and fees tied to low-level and inviolent offenses." Lee Robertson, the man with pancreatic cancer, first ran into trouble in 2009 when he was diagnosed and began his first round of chemotherapy. His sickness forced him to stop working, which eliminated his source of income and made it impossible for him to sustain himself. In the course of 2 weeks, Robertson wrote 11 checks to stores for small amounts ranging from $5 to $41 that all bounced. After 6 years and 7 arrests, Robertson Robertson ended up in Hale's courtroom, where Hale said that the cancer patient owed the court $3,054.51 in fees and restitution. Robertson had been unable to pay these fines and checks because his pancreatic cancer had prevented him from returning to work. Hale has come under loads of scrutiny for the way he runs his hot checks division, which is a court that assesses cases dealing with bad checks. The judge is now under investigation for the questionable practices he employs in his court. The lawsuit outlines the lucrative system used, in which no family or friends are allowed to accompany the defendant, and the defendant must sign a form that waives their right to an attorney. This leaves those being prosecuted completely vulnerable and unable to properly defend themselves or make an argument in their favor. The suit claims that the court acts as an extension of a collection agency, essentially collecting money from those living in poverty in order to contribute more money to the city's budget every year. Each overdrawn check can bring in $400 in fines and fees, not including the restitution to pay back the amount of the check. This is a broken court system that disregards the due process rights at every turn, Clark added. Hopefully, justice will be served to this judge and others involved in this scheme, so that less people living below poverty line won't have to continue to be huge contributors to the city's budget. That. Another example of our corrupt court system. And the last one that I have for you today, this is off of the mirror.co.uk, and it says, caring 7-year-old entrepreneur raises thousands in adorable attempt to keep his neighbors safe. This is how it reads. For most 7-year-olds, life revolves around going to school, playing with friends, and catching a few hours of cartoons. But one caring young boy is spending his time looking out for his local community, and it's all because of Pokemon Go. Ethan Scalido from Nebraska had noticed people walking around at night, not paying much attention to where they were walking because they were so gripped by the augmented reality game. The idea of making Poke Glow badges light and make his neighbors more visible so they aren't in any accidents. On his GoFundMe page, where he was hoping to raise $5,000 to produce the free gift, Ethan wrote, "This is for my Poke Glow business that I started. I want every Pokemon Go player to have one so that they can be safe at night. I do not want anyone to ever get hurt. Go." Auburn told Mirror Online that her son is a 38-year-old philanthropist in a 7-year-old's body. The caring kid has already smashed his target, raising over $7,800, and his plan has worked so well he's now expanding it outside of Pokemon Go players. Said he has been giving away the safety buttons in our local parks to Pokemon Go players, but we also started noticing that people who were not playing also wanted the buttons, since they are really reflective and work well for nighttime visibility. Because of this, Ethan is using the money we have raised so far to make and donate large quantities of the Poke Glows to schools in urban areas with low-lit neighborhoods. Especially helpful as we get into fall with an earlier sunset. I am very proud of Ethan and everything he has done. There you go. I don't approve of this Pokemon Go thing at all. I think that it's a big waste of time. I think that there's better ways to spend your time than that. I think that it is a tracking, and everybody that's messing with that is playing right into it. But here we got a 7-year-old child need for people to be safe, regardless of whatever it is they're doing, and has taken it upon himself to raise money to make a safety device for people. So that begs the question, what are you doing? If a 7-year-old kid can find a need and find a way to fill it, what's your excuse? So with that being said, I'm going to close her down for today. I hope that everybody has a wonderful day. I hope you do some reflection and try to find a need and fill it and help somebody and help a lot of people if you can. Figure out something that you can do. Go out, ground yourself, put your feet down in the grass, take a breath of fresh air, and balance. Find some balance in your life. Shut her down, and we'll wish you a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.